We had a mouse in the house, in the kitchen, and Leo and Gus were trying to catch the mouse, and it got behind the stove, and Jerry was trying to get it out on one side, and he said to me, he says, I don't know how old I was, not just too old and not very bright. He says, put your foot there, he says, on the other side of the stove. And I did, and of course, what happened, but the mouse came out, up and ran up my pant leg. And of course, that made Jerry happy. I fell for that, but not a second time.
We had a truck that came around, delivered the groceries, you know, you could buy right off the truck.
And we always had to clean, Pat and I, the boys' room and our room too, but we would get the room all cleaned up, and then of course then the boys, Jerry and Leo, I remember most, would come in, and from working on the farm, of course they would take their shoes off and they would empty all their sand and chaff and stuff on the floor. And of course, guess who got to clean it up again?
When school started, and they weren't done with our room, so we had church. We had class in the back of church for a while. And then Art and Bernie Newmeyer got a horse and buggy, and they drove us to school. And after that, Willie Leidig got a bus, and he had our route for the rest of the time that we went to school. And that was it. We went down to St. Norbert's at Roxbury.
On Saturdays, Grandma would have the whole kitchen table full of sweet rolls. And that was just every Saturday thing. And I remember Bobby and Donna coming out a lot. And, Doc and Rosie were there a lot, and Frank and Violet.
Did they pick the berries for Grandma to bake pie?
Frankie Morla came out to the farm, and he always took our dogs and stuff and went squirrel hunting and stuff. Anyway, he went over toward Fry's Pond over there, and the dogs had something in a hole. They were digging, and of course Frankie went over there, and I guess he dug with the dogs. Finally the dogs came pulling out. They came pulled out with a skunk. Frankie had a leather jacket on, I remember that. He got sprayed, and the dogs got sprayed. He came home, and I guess Ma just tore into him. Yeah. Get out of the house, get away. And then I think he had a dog too, and the dog jumped in the car, hit on him. Yeah, let the car off.
We were on deer hunting up there, and they dropped me off down by the Crane Lake on the back road, and nobody ever come to pick me up. So I walked from up there, walked all the way down to my folks down to Roxbury, and them guys, I don't think they ever missed me. Nobody ever picked me up.
Way up in the barn in the point where the window is, threw them out, see if they could fly. They got to fly. And I don't know how many we threw out there, and a salesman happened to come. He was at the door with Mom. He's wondering if them chickens always fly out of there. Of course, that was the end of that.
Grandma didn't like all the dogs the boys had in the house, and I remember one specific time when they had this all planned out. I think it was, pretty sure it was Leo and Gus, or probably Joe and Ray were in on it too, but anyway, the dog came in and was cold and laid behind the stove in the living room, and she was like, get that dog out of here. And so they finally got the dog out, and then they had some plastic poop, and they thought that was pretty funny, and Grandma got mad at them because she thought the dog pooped in the living room and it was just plastic.
We did what we were told to do.
We had a few lake traps, and right where the house sits here, there was always some fresh holes dug, and we figured it was fox. So we went, had a wooden fence post, and had our traps tied onto that or nailed on. We set them in that hole, and next day we came down to check traps, and everything was stuck shut. Fence post was just a little bit sticking out of the mound of dirt. And so we dug around and got a hold of that fence post, and we started, finally when we started getting an opening, it kept closing on us. Anyhow, it took us an hour or so. We finally got it pulled out to see what it was. We thought it was a fox. Here was a badger. They must have always worked on this hill here. There was always holes there, and that's what it was. We ended up killing it. The dogs actually killed it. They were dogs barking, and we were shoveling, and dogs barking and pulling on that thing. You couldn't hardly gain on them because they actually dig so fast, so much they dig them themselves shut, behind them. But we finally got them. That was, I think they were probably protected too.
Yeah. And Ma had a nice big ham, and Elvin had a coonhound, and somehow that coonhound got that ham and ate it. And he says Ma was so mad. He says they had to get Father Walter up there to calm her down.
He tells about the time when Grandma had pies cooling on the windowsill, and they went and took them and ate them. And she didn't know what happened to her pies, but they thought that was
They all had pie before dinner.
funny. They stole Grandma's warm pies.
I can remember two horses, or two or three horses in the barn that Lawrence mostly, well, Pa and them hooked them up for
Yeah,
for plowing and stuff.
you'd have to pull the fork back out
Yeah,
on pulleys, and it would come down, then you'd have to set the fork, outside on the hay wagon, and then these horses would go and that would pull it up around.
I forgot all about them horses too until I was down in North Carolina in the Army in '61. Went for a ride on a weekend, and there they were, a couple of fields. They had one of them one-horse plows. They had a horse in front of it, a single horse, and they had 60, 70 acres to plow that way, and they had that guy following.
Well, I plowed this field over here on the other side of the barn one time, house here, and you do that all day once with that walking plow, and have two horses pulling that. And every time you'd hit a stone, it would either go out that way or it would tip over, and then you'd have to pull it all the way back and back up the horses. If you plowed an acre in a day, you did a lot. And you were so doggone tired at night you couldn't even walk no more. And where do you think all them stones come from?
I just have memories of the boys playing ball, playing catch on Sunday morning. Elvin polishing his wooden boat, making sure it's all shiny.
When we go out to the farm after we were married, lots of times we'd play cards.
When Pat was working in Madison and they'd come home on a weekend, and it's like, oh, we're going to be having graham cracker pie because Pat's coming home, and she'd make graham cracker pie, and it's so darn good. I wish I had the recipe. But they tease her about it because like that was the only dessert she knew how to make.
We went to the prom, and I didn't get home till what, 4 in the morning?
At least.
And I did go to bed. You know what we did the next day? Pounded fence posts. He never said that that's what it was for, and I didn't. I kept pounding on fence posts too. I never said anything. Just we fixed fence that day. And if you ever pounded fence posts, then you'll know it's a job.
Every Sunday after church, she'd stop at Brownie's and get a ring or two of bologna, and because probably some of the kids would come home, and with that we'd have Jell-O with bananas and fried potatoes, one pan with onions and one pan without onions.
When Al was in the Navy, he had a dog, a coonhound, I think. Navy, not Navy, Army. He had a coonhound, and that dog stayed at the end of the driveway all day long, and Grandma didn't know why. Well, he came home on a surprise visit, and that dog seemed to know that he was coming.
No life jackets or anything, and we went and got a couple of pieces of logs and stuff and wired them together, and so we could catch fish for sure, but we had to go to the mill and catch them. And then we got 4 big pieces, and we stuck it down in the mud and kind of nailed a few pieces on there and put some boards on the top, and we'd go out there with that raft, and then we'd sit on there and fish. And Billy Selmers left it there, and he was over there too and helped. He was in on all this stuff. We were sitting there one day, and the thing was really wiggly. You know, it had the fish hanging on a string on it, and that whole thing started shaking all the time. Here's a snapping turtle pulling on the fish that we had on the string. If my ma would have seen us out there,
because he had pneumonia. And then Bestie and I and Luann went out on the farm, and we stayed and cooked. And Bestie went to work in the morning, and it was cold. Oh my gosh, it was so cold. And then I had a wash when I was out there, and Lawrence says, well, he says, you hang the wash outside, and you know where the wash line was. Oh, I hung those wash up before I picked the clothes up to hang them up. They were frozen. Oh gosh, that was an experience. But Lawrence was such a peach. He was such a gentle person, wasn't he? Yeah, I just thought he was just brilliant, really nice. And he was so patient with the boys, the kids, especially the boys. Bestie thought an awful lot of him. Yeah, I think he went up berry picking with him and whatever.
Bob bought a TV before we had one, so on Sunday we'd watch the football games, but it was not very good because the picture was pretty snowy, and even though at one time, shortly after that, we put an antenna on top of the house, and that got a little bit better, but it was still not very dependable because, you know, that big hill across the road towards Madison, TV was not nearly as the signal was not nearly as strong as it needed to be.
That first television set that we had, Gus brought that from the Gamble store in Wanakee. That's why we had TV. We had that piece of plastic that was colored, and we put that, they had it right on the screen, and so we had color TV.